Hello, friends. I'm Kathy Fay, Executive Director of the Boston Early Music Festival, or BEMF, and I'm delighted to welcome you to this pre-concert talk as we look forward to the upcoming performance of our 2021-2022 concert season, featuring the extraordinarily gifted young musicians of Juilliard415 on Saturday, March 26th at 8 p.m. in the beautiful sanctuary of First Church Cambridge Congregational, located in the heart of Harvard Square here in Cambridge, Massachusetts. It is my honor to introduce our two guests, Christoph Wolff, world respected for his numerous books and scholarship on the music, life, and work of Johann Sebastian Bach, Emeritus Professor of Harvard University, member of the Board of Trustees of the Packard Humanities Institute, and member of the Corporation of the Boston Early Music Festival. And Robert Mealy, internationally acclaimed Baroque violinist, recording artist, teacher, director of Juilliard's prestigious Historical Performance Department, and director of the Boston Early Music Festival Orchestra. Welcome, Christoph and Robert.
Thank you.
Our upcoming presentation by Juilliard415 underscores BEMF's commitment to nurturing the careers of so many young musicians and marks our third such collaboration with Juilliard. In fact, the gifted young artists of J415 first appeared at our June 2015 festival alongside students of the Royal Academy of Music under the direction of Masaki Suzuki with violin soloist Rachel Podger. And we were thrilled to welcome them back in November of 2016, together with students from the Royal Conservatoire of The Hague, for a memorable performance of Bach's B minor Mass under the leadership of Ton Koopman. And our upcoming performance marks the conducting debut of Paul Agnew, perhaps best known as musical co-director of Les Arts Florissants, in this thrilling program devoted to CPE Bach. For those wishing to attend our concert on Saturday, March 26th in person, tickets are still available, and we'd be thrilled to see you. For those unwilling or unable to attend in person, virtual tickets are also available. Our video broadcast of this performance premieres on Friday, April 8th, and will be available for viewing for 2 weeks until Friday, April 22nd. Please visit the BEMF website at bemf.org to secure your in-person or virtual tickets. Finally, I'd like to thank our good friends and colleagues at the Packard Humanities Institute for their generous support of this concert. In fact, this performance celebrates the Packard Humanities Institute's recent publication of CPE Bach's complete works. I'd also like to thank Sue Robinson, Vice President of the Board of Directors of the Boston Early Music Festival, and Sue's generous leadership support enabling us to present tonight's concert by Juilliard415. So with that, I will disappear from the screen and turn the discussion over to my two esteemed colleagues, Christoph Wolff and Robert Mealy. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kathy Fay. It's really a pleasure to be here. I think all of us always today associate the word Bach with Johann Sebastian Bach, but actually in the 18th century, one of the first names to come to mind when you heard that was one of his older sons, Carl Philipp Emanuel Bach. Christoph, could you tell us a little bit about how Emanuel was viewed in his lifetime and why he was such a figure in musical life at the time in Germany?
The thing is that Carl Philipp Emanuel Bach, the second son of Johann Sebastian, covered in his lifetime most of the 18th century. He was born in 1714 and he died in 1788. So short of the initial decade, in the last decade, he really stands for the 18th century. And that means he, in his influential work from particularly the two musical centers in Berlin and in Hamburg, where he was active, he spread his influence all across Europe. And I think that was not the case with his father's music, who was much more limited in his influence initially with respect to the wider European landscape, which was open to his son and also related to cultural developments in the 18th century and the Age of Enlightenment that CPE Bach represents. And it's no surprise when Mozart at one point asked about, Carl Philipp Emanuel Bach said, he is the father, we are the kids. And that indicates that, Haydn and Mozart, and that is also true of Beethoven, really were seriously influenced by the many forward-looking aspects of Carl Philipp Emanuel Bach's music.
That's so wonderful. I think often we think today of, oh, there was the Baroque period, and then suddenly there was the classical period. And what I find most fascinating about CPE is that he has his own very, very, very particular musical language that actually we can see transform over his career. But it's one that really owes a great deal to his father. He cherished his father's works. He kept them, unlike his brother Wilhelm Friedemann. And you even see in many of the pieces in tonight's program, you really see he uses the autograph, the BACH musical autograph that his father would use. So he was very conscious of the heritage that he brought. But at the same time, he's so modern, he's so interesting, and it's a very, very, very different language than what turns into the language of the high classical period. I find it totally engaging, a very edgy and often rather avant-garde sound that he creates.
That is very true. And I think it's also important to realize what you indicated, that he doesn't fit into any of the traditional periods. He doesn't fit into the Baroque, and he doesn't fit into the classic period. He bridges the periods, much like his contemporary Christoph Willibald does. So I think the two, Gluck in the area of opera and Philipp Emanuel Bach in the area of instrumental music in particular, really shape much of the 18th century and feeds into the classical period.
Mm-hmm. It's wonderful. In fact, in our program, the way it turned out for us was that we happened to create a program that really traces Bach's career from his first work with his father in the 1730s all the way to his very last extraordinary symphonies that he writes in the 1780s in Hamburg. Christoph, could you tell us a little bit of his relation with his father and how he learned his craft, particularly around this fascinating cantata that we'll be performing, which I gather was only rediscovered in 2010, is that right?
That's correct. Yeah, the piece that we will hear at the concert, Ich bin vergnügt, it's a solo cantata for bass and strings and basso continuo, is the earliest vocal piece we have by CPE Bach. And I think what it reflects is the solid training the youngest son, the second youngest son, got from his father. We know little about his way he was taught because we do not have the kind of documentation that we have for his older brother, Wilhelm Friedemann, for whom Johan Sebastian prepared a Klavierbüchlein, a little textbook that helped to really trace the lessons that he received from his father. This little clavier book contains, for example, the 2-part and 3-part inventions that are still part of the keyboard training ground for eager students today. CPE Bach may have received a similar a training book, but we have no real trace of it. So we don't know, but the results of his initial compositions indicate that he received very solid technical training in harmony and counterpoint and in formal design. We know of his very first compositions, which are marches and minuets and little dances that he entered into his stepmother's clavier book or album as a schoolboy. And it indicates that, these exercises in dances were important for composition students to gain some control over, formal spaces. A dance movement consists maybe of 32 measures only, but it consists of phrases that approach a which leads harmonically to the dominant and then back to. So a little form is created, and this helps to get the students familiar with musical designs early on. By the way, Leopold Mozart trained his son Wolfgang Amadeus in very much the same way. So the earliest compositions by Mozart are also minuets and other dances. But one of the important things in the training CPE Bach and his brothers received from his father is the individual spark that was fostered by the father. The father made sure that the sons would not simply emulate his music, and they would not be cloned composers. They were composers in their own right. And you can tell from, just the first measures of this solo cantata, which the 18-year-old CPE Bach composed, that there are some melodic steps taken by him that his father would not have done. So he really went beyond what J.S. Bach considered an ideal and started his own way of formulating his musical language.
Yeah, I find it fascinating because it's a cantata that uses picander, uses Bach's own librettist, and you'd think it would very much follow the model of his father. But as you say, from the very first bars, you're immediately in a different world. It's a very specific individual language.
It's amazing the way he is really starting his own way of doing things, despite the fact that this was clearly an assignment that his father gave him. It's taken from a published collection of J.S. Bach's principal librettist, Henrizi, pen name Picander, and it was first performed at the Thomaskirche before CPE Bach graduated. He graduated from the St. Thomas School, at the age of 18, around Easter in 1732. And in February, he performed this piece, this cantata. We assume it might have been something like a graduation piece. So, this is the piece in which CPE Bach demonstrates to the public, because it was performed in public, at the St. Thomas Church during the service, that, he was a composer in his own right and could start his professional career from there.
Yeah, and it's such a strong individual voice. I mean, one of the other pieces we're doing is a amazing cello concerto in A major that he had written during his Berlin period and probably later revised. But 1753, it's really right in the middle of the 18th century. But one of the striking things I find about that piece is the extreme contrast between forte and piano. This very what they call the Empfindsamer stil, where it's all about this extreme reactions. And the result, especially in the slow movement, I find, is something that is immensely powerful. It's very much like Beethoven in a way.
Very true. I think, a very characteristic of this middle period of Philipp Emanuel Bach in the late 1740s and 50s and early 60s is the discovery of musical contrasts, very sharp contrasts that really broaden the musical language, of an instrumental piece that would display all kinds of expressive devices, in a most unpredictable way. So I think, some quirky elements are in there, and they are deliberate because I think Bach wants to get away from the even flow of the typical Baroque movement, where you stay within one kind of motivic context, and you may have mild contrasts, perhaps in a da capo aria, where the middle part contrasts to the framing parts. But here in the concerto and in the symphonies from the same period, and also in the keyboard music, he plays with very sharp and unpredictable contrasts that to some extent must have shocked the audience at the time, and drove them to pay attention to what is coming next.
Absolutely. It's full of surprises, and it's full of astonishments too, which I find just completely wonderful. I think we often think of his career as having this period in Berlin where he's very much under the thumb of the court. He's being asked for much more gallant music that may not necessarily be his own taste. But then he kind of finds his liberation by taking the job in Hamburg that his godfather, Georg Philipp Telemann, had before him in 1768. And once he comes to Hamburg, he's kind of his own master. And one of the wonderful things in this program has been to explore the late symphonies that he writes. And I find it wonderful that it's a connection to the next generation in a way, because these symphonies, both the string symphony and the orchestra symphonies with winds, were commissioned by this very important figure of an amazing networker of the Baron von Swieten.
Right. The Baron von Swieten is an important figure in the history of music because, he was the court librarian in Vienna, and as a scholarly minded person, he made many connections from Vienna to the countries with which the Habsburg Empire established diplomatic connections. So he actually got to know Philipp Emanuel Bach in Berlin, where he served as ambassador of the Habsburg court, and then he became a very close friend and kept in touch with Philipp Emanuel Bach throughout his later life. And we know that van Swieten was responsible for bringing Handel and music by CPE Bach to Mozart's Vienna. And he did it via Hamburg because the person from whom Swieten received the Handel scores was CPE Bach, who had very close connections to London. So after Handel's death, his brother Johann Christian was active in Hamburg, in London, and the London Hamburg Vienna axis was really very important, and CPE Bach was at the center of it. And for this reason, I think it is important to consider these symphonies, which were published in 1780. And, an earlier set of symphonies was actually dedicated and was commissioned by van Swieten and then dedicated to him by CPE Bach. But these new symphonies published in 1780 were of a new kind because, as the title indicates, orchestral symphonies with 12 obbligato voices. What does that mean? 12 obbligato voices. These symphonies were the first published works of any composer dealing with a new type of orchestra that not only had as its core the traditional strings, violins, violas, cellos, and basses, but had independent winds, 2 horns, 2 flutes, 2 oboes, so and bassoons, 2 bassoons. So this kind of orchestration becomes standard for Haydn and Mozart in the later years. But it was CPE Bach who started this, it's a programmatic title, 12 obbligato voices. You find it nowhere else, but it's the kind of innovative spirit that is reflected in these pieces.
And as I understand, van Swieten actually part of the brief for CPE was that CPE was encouraged to use his full imagination for these pieces, that he should be unhindered by any constraints. And what results for the players is a level of virtuosity, of collective virtuosity, that is remarkable. And it's actually wonderful to do it with our students at Juilliard, because they're just astonishing players. They completely rise to these occasions. So it's been, in preparing this program, it's been wonderfully breathtaking to hear the incredible energy and power of this music come to life with virtuoso players.
I could well imagine, how much fun they must have had, because it really makes them sit at the edge of their chairs, because everyone is busy. I mean, if you play the second flute part or the second horn part, you are just as engaged as the first violin and the cello. So it's amazing.
Yeah, I find the whole gamut of his expressive possibilities, from deep, deep, deep sadness, from melancholy, from this extraordinarily serious moments, to these brilliant passages for everyone involved, to often some wonderfully joyous and sparkling movements as well. So I think the whole program actually creates this wonderful portrait of this remarkable figure that I don't think we do justice to enough these days.
It's very true. I think the program is beautifully designed because it really covers about 50 years of CPE Bach's creative life, and gives insight to his commitment to the tradition in the cantata, and the language that he learned from his father, but really developed in a new way. And then the very innovative aspects in the concerto and the later symphonies, and especially in the final symphonies, it demonstrates an extraordinary range that in many ways reflects the spectrum of CPE Bach's influence on at least 2 generations of musicians in Europe in the 18th century.
And I have to say that I really have to give a shout out to the Packard Institute for not only underwriting a lot of this program, but also for making the entire corpus of CPE Bach available to us today. I recommend everyone to go investigate cpebach.org, which is the Packard Institute's site for this. Christoph, you've been very involved in this whole editions process.
I've been involved from the very beginning, yes, indeed. And it was a lot of fun because this editorial project by the Packard Humanities Institute not only put CPE Bach on the map as never before, but it also fills an important gap that we suffered from for a long time with respect to 18th century music. Believe it or not, the entirety of the CPE Bach edition consists of 114 volumes, which really indicates how productive this guy was. And we are close to finishing. It's just a handful of volumes that are still to be completed, and that will be done in the course of this year. But the 114 volumes fill an incredible space in the possibilities for performing 18th century music as we could never do it before. So I think in that respect, this edition is a major achievement in the history of music.
Absolutely. And remarkably enough, through the generosity of the Packard Humanities Institute, the scores are all downloadable for free. The parts are also downloadable. And if you want to have a physical volume, the beautifully, beautifully printed volumes are available for a remarkably low price. So
I'm just showing you, here's a volume cloth bound, and it's very reasonably priced. It's unbelievable. For a European edition, you would pay $200-300 per volume, and these are all under $100. So it's incredible.
Yeah. So this is fantastic. It really, as you say, it really changes the narrative of how we think about 18th century music with all of this. Well, Christoph, thank you so much for joining me in this conversation. It's really
Thank you, Robert.